Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mashpee Men's Club on this beautiful day. We always start our meeting off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we do have good news today. We have a couple new members that
who I've known for a long time now. And when I got the word that it had been agreed that Rodney had the time on his schedule, I checked with his shadow, that be Wayne Taylor, his assistant, and said, okay, so what will the boss be able to talk about? He said, he'll talk about anything. All I gotta do is kind of give him a couple of words and he'll hum the tune from there. So feel perfectly free to bring it up. So with that, I took the liberty of starting to list various kinds of things that are going on. There's a special town meeting coming up, there's elections coming up. We're all interested in what's happening with sewers around here, what's the latest with our water qualities, and so forth. So there's more things to talk about than we probably all have time to talk about. And Rodney is always able to do that. You understand this is now 10 years, just about 10 years that you've been the town manager?
Nine. Coming up on
years,
9.
working up on 10. And on top of that, before that, there was another 10 years where he was the chief of police. So if anybody in this community knows what's going on, this is the guy. You know, he knew it from various roles and responsibilities before he ascended into the job that he's in now. So let's put our hands together and welcome Rodney here today.
Come on, Rod. Yeah. You know,
I don't want to steal this gentleman's seat, but
no,
am I okay sitting here?
that's just fine.
Okay, so obviously when I have an opportunity to speak like this in front of a group of distinguished citizens, I think it's always important to try to stay focused on pressing issues or relevant issues of the day. And I don't think there's anything more relevant right now, or anything that's more of a priority, or anything that's more in focus, particularly as it relates to questions as the wastewater and clean water challenges of the town. So I don't like to generally repeat myself, although I find myself doing that occasionally. What I do want to do is start this address, if you will, by repeating something that I said last night to the select board, because it is very relevant for a town meeting, which is just around the corner in May, and it's also very relevant to the clean water issues that the town is facing. So it's about 2 minutes, so bear with me, and I think you're going to find the information very important. In just over 1 month, residents of Mashpee will have the opportunity to decide whether to authorize funding for Phase 2 of the wastewater management and clean water plan initiated in 2015. Many people have had questions relative to the scope of this project and its cost. At times, the technical elements of the project overwhelm people, and this has led to some confusion and at times compounding questions. I prefer to provide a simple perspective and brief summary of pertinent information. I recently met with folks from Envision Mashpee and the Clean Water Coalition. It was suggested that this critical timing was necessary to provide voters with an informed path towards town meeting May 6, 2024. Thank you, Wayne. First and foremost, Article 6 of the special town meeting will rescind the previously authorized borrowing at the October 16, 2023 town meeting in the amount of $4.5 million. Essentially, that was to provide us with the authorization that we needed, but as it turned out, we were able to cover it. And if you're wondering, well, why did we vote on that if you didn't need it? if we didn't vote on it and we needed it, then we would have been really in a mess. Article 4 of the annual town meeting will authorize the town to fund $96.1 million to complete Phase 2. The scope of the plan and specific roads involved can be found at the Town of Mashpee website. Click on the Clean Water tab. At the top of the page, you can review the roads covered by Phase 2. What most people ask is, what will this cost them? After consultation with the finance team, the wastewater management superintendent, engineers, and others, it is important to provide a good faith estimate based upon reasonable and realistic projections. I have consistently strived to minimize the impact on the property tax rate paid by Mashpee citizens. Therefore, all available funding sources have been utilized to lower the amount to be assessed of the levy through a debt exclusion in May. My debt service plan relies on the following. 1, obtaining a 0% state revolving fund or SRF loan. Mashpee's eligibility for this loan was confirmed by a DEP letter last week and is contingent on our continued compliance with the flow neutral bylaw and voter approval of the project in May. 2, 25% principal debt relief from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, written confirmation of which was received last week. 3, 3.3% principal forgiveness provided by the Mass Clean Water Trust, per their regulations and formula. 4, using all future projected revenue not already committed to prior debt service from the WIF and Wastewater Stabilization Fund consistent with conservative estimates for revenue growth and developed internally. 5, tapping the levy for a property tax increase based only on the debt service not covered by the revenue streams above. The bottom line is that I expect the Phase 2 property tax increase, averaged over the 30-year life of the SRF loan, to be about $75 per year for the average residential valued home, which is roughly $772,000 in Mashpee. To put it in simple terms, this is likely to cost less than an expensive cup of coffee per week. I would further point out that the debt payments on Phase 2 will not commence until fiscal 2029, at the earliest. This project will not have a fiscal impact on the tax rate for almost 5 years, during which time we will have the opportunity to adjust our payment approach to further reduce tax impacts if revenues exceed the conservative projections. The estimate does not include any operational adjustments or increases. And the Select Board had no objections to this information last night, and I intend to deliver it to the Sewer Commission this afternoon. Sorry, you're going to have to hear it again. And this guidance will be distributed to provide voters with information in preparation of town meeting. So the important thing to remember is it's very easy to get to the scope of the plan in terms of, am I on that list? The roads are there, they're listed. And secondly, if you want to determine how much it's going to cost you, I just referred to the average residential. However, there is a formula or calculator that you can use on the town's website to try to identify that as well. So I just wanted to get that information out, and obviously it's by far and away the biggest challenge facing Mashpee. I think it's fair to say that that is the talk of the town, and obviously that will be front and center, Phase 2, at the May town meeting. what I've also found is a person such as myself is responsible for implementing the policy of the policymakers. In this climate, it's rare that the policymakers are 100% unified. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the policymakers from the Select Board and the Sewer Commission are unanimous in support of moving forward with this project. So the folks who are on the executive body, the folks who are responsible for the sewer policy are jointly unified in support of moving this forward. I don't want to say that that is no easy task, but in today's climate, I think that speaks volumes. So that is something that I wanted to get out right up front, and I want to highlight a couple of other things that are coming up before town meeting, but I don't know if there's any questions on what I just said.
You wanna take them now?
There is a ballot question that goes with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a good point, very valid point. So this will require a 2/3 vote at town meeting, but in addition, for the debt exclusion, it will require an affirmative vote at the ballot.
So when will this, if it passes now, when will they start taking money from the people or?
2029 is when it's going to impact your wallet. In terms of phase one, and I don't want to confuse phase one with phase two, but we should be seeing some activity in January in phase one, and it should be online in probably July of 2025.
Could I have a copy of that, what you just read?
Absolutely.
I have two questions, and they're born from my own ignorance of this entire thing. One is, how many phases are envisioned until the entire project is done?
There's a total of 5 phases, and obviously, this is phase 2. There was some discussion about the possibility of not needing all of the phases, depending upon the fertilization bylaw based on the activities from DNR, the Department of Natural Resources. I think they want to see the results from those programs. They want to see the results of phase 1 and phase 2. But I don't want to speak for the Sewer Commission, and I don't want to speak for the Select Board. I just want to say that there's a total of 5, but as of right now, the only one that is front and center is phase 2, which will be in May.
At the conclusion of phase 2, what percentage of the homes in Mashpee will be on sewer?
I think it's 43% are going to be covered by,
That's gonna be the reduction.
Yeah. yeah, not in total of the residents of the town, but the total that was going to be focused on, I think was 43.
I think it's around 1,500, isn't it, Al?
Yeah,
Total
we have
number.
1288 on phase 2, and I forgot the
400,
exact.
I thought, 441?
Yeah, something, yeah.
I got hands going every which way. I'll take this, gentlemen.
Okay, in addition to the cost that's spread over the total town, each individual homeowner has a cost as well to hook up, right?
Yes.
Are there ways for that cost to be mitigated? for the
Yes.
homeowner?
And that cost is very difficult to pinpoint because it depends on how far back your house sits and exactly where is the hookup going to be. But I think if anybody has a question over that, I certainly welcome you to contact wastewater management department and ask for the superintendent. Jared Meter. He'll be more than happy to help you with that. Richard?
Before, I believe the total number was 15 in change on the amount of homes that are going to be sewered between phase 1 and 2.
Yes. The raw number of homes, yes.
Yes.
So, phase 1 is pretty well done.
Yeah, it's not online, but
But in the manufacturing, the mechanical part of it is done.
yeah, the facility is, as you probably have all seen, if you go to the transfer station, it's right next to the transfer station. You can't possibly miss it.
So that manufacturing facility, which is built, that's, is that totally paid for, accounted for before we start in?
That's part of phase 1. The facility and the collection system were part of phase 1. Phase 2 is going to be connected to the facility that we're building.
So they're helping to pay for part of part 1. Part 2 is paying for part of part 1, for the,
I'm not following you, Harold.
so, phase 2.
Phase 2 is a completely separate scope.
Yes,
The facility and the collection system was part of phase 1.
and so that's the, how do you call it?
Phase 2,
Phase 2 is distribution, and number 1 is manufacturing,
well, phase 2 is an expansion of the collection system.
yes.
And phase 2 makes phase 1 efficient, because you've
Yeah,
got more throughput.
Exactly. Do you have a wastewater background?
No,
No.
only to flush a toilet.
So you're an engineer.
Sanitary engineer.
Very technical.
All right, I just want to touch base on a couple of other items that I think are relevant to town meeting. So obviously, you've got 2 meetings, both on Monday, May 6th at 7 p.m. One is the special town meeting, and then one is the annual town meeting. So at the special, I thought it was worthy to point out that you'll be asked to transfer and appropriate the amount of $2,629,134 from revenue available to capital stabilization. Now, why is that important to you folks? Consistent with Select Board Policy 072 that was adopted a number of years ago, it's a capital improvement policy that sets aside 15% of certified free cash. And what that does is it provides stability so that we can fund the capital improvement program. I think in years past, we were unprepared to plan for long-term capital needs. And what we have done is we've carefully addressed our assets, we've assessed them, and the assets that need to be replaced, and by the way, the threshold is $25,000. So whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a facility, whether it's an improvement to an auditorium at the school, or an improvement to a athletic field, whatever it is, we try to incorporate that into a 5-year plan, and we even try to plan further beyond that, but we try to incorporate it into a 5-year plan and evaluate the urgency to it, and a committee meets, looks at the issues, and determines how much of a priority it is, and then once that's determined, and if it's approved, it goes to town meeting for funding after it's been properly vetted. So it's a thorough review, but it's also an effective plan in order to make sure that our assets like this building don't get into a condition of disrepair. Also, in Article 6, we'll be asking to rescind the $4.5 million for the planning and design of Phase 2 of the wastewater initiatives, and we're doing that because, as I mentioned earlier, we just don't need to have those funds in terms of the debt exclusion. The operating budget is contained, obviously, in your packet under Article 2, and the amounts that were requested were $73,794,378. The amount that was approved by myself, the town manager, and also recommended by the Finance Committee was $72,292,490. And how did we get to that amount? We sat with the department heads and we tried to determine what was mission critical. After carefully reviewing things, we certainly don't want to see any personnel laid off or anything like that if we can avoid it. And again, that was never really serious consideration. So we're able to maintain our level services, fulfill all of our contractual obligations with the respective unions, and at the same time take care of our mission critical expenses, and that's the bottom line, and stay within any necessity for 2.5 overrides. You will see in another article a request for $4,526,634 in capital. You will also see, as I mentioned earlier, the $96.1 million for Phase 2. You will also see an article that would repurpose the appropriation and borrowing authorization for the police department and DPW roof replacement. Long story short, the PD had an HVAC system that needed to be replaced. And in the process of doing that, it was discovered that there was an issue in terms of the air circulation, quality of air, etc. And there was also a serious deficiency in the booking room, which doesn't seem to pass state inspections year after year. So what we're doing is taking money that was going to be designated for the HVAC system, and we're taking a look at determining the long-term needs of the facility, whether it be to renovate the facility, and I hesitate to use the word building a new facility, but we've got to take a look to see what exactly needs to be done there to get that up to some acceptable standards, because right now it is not at the standards that it should be at. So that is in Article 5, and then in Article 6, there's an attempt to reauthorize and extend the 3 years of the authority to use $350,000 from capital stabilization for the resurfacing of the high school parking lot. I think it was due to expire.
Yes.
And then there's also an article regarding repurposing $130,000 for the Department of Natural Resources to potentially have a design and construction of a yard off from Red Brook for the purposes of exterior storage of and maintenance of boats and other equipment used by the Department of Natural Resources. Currently, their location is right over here next to the PD. And then for positions, we try to avoid creating any new positions if we can avoid it. And we are very cognizant of the limitations of the tax dollar and with all of the costs that are associated with wastewater and just maintaining operations on a year-to-year basis, I have tried to avoid adding new personnel. But like anything else, you reach the point where sometimes it becomes necessary to add a person to a particular department. Last year, we did create some new positions for the library because the part-time personnel were just not simply getting the job done because of their lack of availability. People are not necessarily interested in part-time employment, they're focused more on a full-time position with benefits. We do have an article for a full-time wastewater executive assistant. We need that person to assist the superintendent of wastewater in order to get his job done. And also, we have proposed a full-time position that would be in IT, that would be a public safety technician. And although this is technically a new position, it really is not, because essentially what we've proposed is taking a position at the PD that was a dispatcher and reclassifying that position and turning it into IT, and that person would be shared between the police department and the fire department. It would be full-time, but the person would be strictly IT. So with the networking world and everything that they deal with, from the mobile data terminals to all of the issues between police and fire, the time has come to have somebody servicing their needs, and that person would be housed at the PD but be under IT, and he or she would be going back and forth to the PD and the fire department as needed. We do also have a part-time position that would be reclassified at the PD as an administrative secretary. Currently, the administrative secretary who was there retired, and the need is there to reclassify the position to full-time. And we also have two other full-time positions that are being sought. One is a maintainer at DPW. DPW is responsible for maintaining all of the infrastructure, from the roads to the bike paths and sidewalks, athletic fields, town buildings and grounds, and so on and so forth. And the need has just reached the point where the additional person could be utilized, from cemeteries to parks to landscape areas, boat ramps, and conservation land. DPW is sometimes challenged with the existing staff. We're also seeking one final position, and that's a new police officer. To my knowledge, a new police officer has not been added to the department in over 20 years. So we're just looking to add one. And I think that covers it. I mean, obviously, there are other articles. There's petitioned articles. I won't bore you with those details. No offense to the petitioners. But I just wanted to cover some of the highlights of the articles contained within the warrant. And now, since I've talked so much, I just want to give you an opportunity to ask me some general questions that you may have.
I have a question about the police department. What is the staffing situation there?
38 police officers full-time, and they have only one full-time administrative assistant. I know that that person takes care of processing all of their billing, and they have a very complicated payroll because there's shift differential, there's weekend differential. Like if somebody's working an evening shift or the night shift, they have a different rate of pay contractually. So it gets very complicated. Long story short, there's only one person doing that. If she is out, they're in trouble. So when she goes on vacation, she's like doing some of the work remotely. So what we're trying to do is make sure that there is an adequate backup And that's why we're looking to make the part-time secretary a full-time secretary who would be able to be there in case the administrative assistant is out.
Okay, so is 38 positions?
That's police officers.
That's police officers. Is that a full complement, or are they?
That's
looking-
a full complement,
is,
yes.
okay.
Yep.
Great.
And they run a day shift, an evening shift, and a night shift. You have protection 24/7. There is always a sergeant on duty or a supervisor that's running the shift. The command staff consists of 2 lieutenants, a captain who's essentially the deputy chief, and then the chief of police.
The cost of the new positions that you just talked about and the reclassified positions, all included in that $72 million?
Yes, well, the articles are separate, but you will see the number associated with those positions within the article.
Right.
And that includes any and all benefits.
Okay.
Yep.
What happens if someone, I mean, some people have been there for quite a while, when they want to retire? So does that, you replace that person, or?
Absolutely. If the person retires, we don't just leave the position vacant.
No, see,
yeah.
but he wouldn't be in the same rank, maybe not necessarily.
No, they start out as a junior officer. Yep.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
okay,
So,
but that would be a little bit less than,
absolutely. So when somebody starts at, let's say, step 1 versus, each union is different. I forget how many steps there are at the PD. I think there might be 10. So obviously you would max out at step 10. You would still get your cost of living adjustment, but the merit steps cease once you max out. But contractually, every 3 years, we sit down, the town sits down, I sit down with the respective unions and negotiate new terms and conditions. Pay, benefits, work conditions are all negotiated as a part of the collective bargaining process. And once the union's negotiating team reaches a tentative settlement with myself and whoever else sits in, it's usually the assistant manager and the HR director, the respective union negotiating team takes it back to the union for ratification. I take it to the select board for ratification. Assuming it's ratified, then it goes to town meeting where you folks have got to vote on funding it. And then assuming that process is completed, then we're done.
it's a big wish list, I mean, in the demand list, but the other part that nobody seems to mention, and I guess I haven't heard any answer to the question, is sludge, which is the end part for the sewer. We don't know whether that's gonna cost $1 million to get it to east, north, or wherever.
Well, I don't want to get into that today, but I invite you to invite the wastewater superintendent to come in and talk about sludge.
Okay.
Because I know that there are some options, and that can be expanded upon in much greater detail.
There's always a hidden cost, no matter what you do.
Well, there are certain costs that obviously you got to take into consideration at any time like this. However, I think in the big picture, what I always take a look at is what happens if we don't do what we have an opportunity to do. I can tell you that the cost is never going to get cheaper. It's going to just keep going up. And I'm not trying to make a political speech here because I can't do that as town manager. But what I can do is tell you, you should examine what happens, what are the consequences for generations to come if we do nothing. And that's what you have to take a look at.
There's one item in regard to the storage that I've seen, with this coming up, there's neglecting to notify that some homes are being remodeled and some new ones going up. And I've seen them put the, rather complicated, they're putting a septic system in the rear of the buildings. And with that problem, they'll have a big problem bringing the sewage back out to the street.
Sure.
And this will disrupt a building quite thoroughly. A plumber showed me a job that he had finished on a friend of mine's home, which I didn't know was going on. I said, what are you gonna do now when you get sewage? They're gonna tear everything all apart and get it back out to the front of the house. So I think if someone's got plans to do something on remodeling or a new home, to make sure that they have the plumbing in such a way they can have it go out to the front of the house.
I think that's a good point. If you have any doubts in terms of, let's say, a D-night system or the Title V compliance, if you have any questions, I strongly suggest that you contact the wastewater management department, speak to the superintendent. He'll take your call, and if he's not there, leave a voicemail. He'll get back to you, or send him an email. I think it's extremely important to plan accordingly. If you think that you're in an upcoming phase, before you actually do something and waste any money, you got to take a look at what is the likelihood that you should or you shouldn't do certain things. We all want to try to be environmentally friendly, but at the same time, nobody wants to waste money out of the pocket or the wallet.
Have streets been designated
Yes.
for different phases?
Yes, yes. And if you go to that website that I listed, you will see whether or not your street is on there for phase 2. It's there.
How about the other phases?
I don't know if we have the streets on, no, we don't, not on phase 3, 4, or 5. What I can tell you is we do have a map, it's a general map, and I want to just caution you all that it has been subjected to some modifications. So, the original plan of 2015 had phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's all mapped out. That has changed a little bit, but what you can do is take a look and see whether or not your house is in phase 3, phase 4, or phase 5. I know I'm in phase 5.
Where is this map?
Town Hall, we can provide you with one, and I know Sewer's got it, or the wastewater management department has it.
In regards to the connection to the system, what about communities that have their own sewage treatment plant, but homes within those villages are not connected to the sewage treatment plant within that village? Are they going to be required to hook up to their local system before they get hooked up to the town system?
That question is an interesting one. I'm going to defer to my sewer commission member that happens to be present, because I think that's a policy decision that has yet to be made for some of the questions that you may have.
The town can't go into can't go into a village and redo
I mean,
it.
that one,
They-
should I
they
pick
have
one
to,
up at town hall?
They have, the town stops at the road, okay? So
Can you go make him a copy of this?
at present, if you were in a village and weren't connected,
You wanna
you
see what I
yes, you
write
have to
before?
connect up to their system, and then if that system gets incorporated, you just send them a
Barris
pipe,
trying to turn out.
they bring one pipe out.
Yeah, it just seems that we're concerned about improving the environment, and there's an awful lot of homes within communities where there is a sewage treatment plant, but they are not hooked up to that sewage treatment plant. So a phase within the phases would be, get them hooked up to a sewage
Absolutely.
treatment plant
Absolutely.
until they can get hooked up to one of the phases of our town system. That would seem to me, it would help the environmental question significantly by getting them hooked up and disposing of their sewerage into a proper system for treatment. So, but that requires a lot of cooperation between those villages, those parts of the town, and the town sewage treatment plant. So, anyway,
So several of us in this room, including Al, and myself, live in Southport, which is
Who's
we have our
going
own
to,
sewage treatment facility for all the homes in all of Southport. So how does that fit into the overall plan? Maybe that's something you could.
will the homeowner have to hire a contractor to tie in to the sewer?
Yes, yes,
We did water,
yes.
An approved contract.
and you pay
Yes.
to the middle of the
And they have a
street.
list of approved contractors at the wastewater management department. Do you want to expand on the
Just
Southport?
to expand on, I believe it's phase 3. They were going to look at these private sewage treatment plants, and we have some big ones in town, and they have excess capacity right now. And it's a lot cheaper to hook in there to an existing plant than it is to start from scratch. We all know what our plant costs right now. And I think that's something that we should look at.
my understanding was an awful lot of these village condo communities, whatever you want to call them, that were built in town over the last 15, 20 years, they've over-configured their sewage treatment systems. So there's capacity there waiting to be used, which would help to reduce the load on our town system. So, I mean, that's an area I think at time will get some
Well,
attention.
just look at Mashpee Commons. Mashpee Commons has a really nice
Oh, yeah.
sewer system, but a lot of those new homes aren't hooked up.
Southport has one, obviously, the Commons, Windchime, Willow Bend, New Seabury.
They're all over-configured.
Yep,
Which is a good news thing.
yes.
Yes.
The town, the condominium development I live in, we're tied into Willow Bend. And we pay a fee every year and it's negotiated and
Yep.
so forth. We got rid of all the septic systems.
Okay,
Could I ask a question? I'll have to ask this question.
Mr. Sweet, ask whatever you'd like.
I'm wondering about the cell tower, and is it online, and when will it be online?
Okay, if you are a Verizon customer, you are online. If you are AT&T, you are not online. If you're T-Mobile, my understanding is it's soon to be online. And I think there's one other one that's under consideration. What I was told last year when they went online is that they needed to do a surgical adjustment for precision, and then there was an osprey nest, so they couldn't do anything. My understanding is, over the course of the winter, they were supposed to make some adjustments. Whether or not that was completed or not, I have not been told. But we have advised people that if they don't have the coverage that they want, to contact their local carrier, because that's what gets their attention.
And you feel comfortable that your
We've done-
staff of the police department, the EMTs are now getting coverage that
Well,
they need?
we've done everything that we can, within reason. There's always ways to try to improve, I guess.
Great.
There was supposed to be like a booster system in some areas.
Yep, we're taking a look at that if necessary, so that the area in question has been enhanced to the reasonable expectations.
There's-
All right, I want to just say one other thing before I depart, because I know this is being recorded. I just want to thank MTV, Chris Ball, and his staff, because I see them on numerous occasions. They are always there at Town Hall, covering the meetings that I attend with the Select Board. They are there covering the meetings with the Finance Committee. And I know that some people will say, well, that's their job because that's the contract. They go above and beyond the contract. There have been a few occasions when we have reached out to them to say, could you cover this public service event? Not because you're contractually obligated to, but because we really need it. And we want to try to get that word out, and they're always there. It's a pleasure to work with MTV. I really appreciate them being the conduit to getting this information out to the public. Between having a local newspaper like the Mashpee Enterprise and having MTV, hopefully the word is getting out to keep the people educated and informed on all of these important issues of the day, particularly those that people will be confronted with at town meeting. So I'm going to give a shout out to them. And, oh, by the way, sometimes people will complain about the service. It's not MTV, it's Comcast. And we're trying to work on those issues. But trying to even talk to a live voice at Comcast is sometimes challenging.
Extremely so.
But I do appreciate MTV. Chris does a great job. He's a good friend of the community. And he's the person behind the camera that brings all of you folks information like this today. So thank you. And with that, you folks have a great afternoon. And I will see this gentleman at the Sewer Commission at 4:30, and I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to listen to me again.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, while we're talking about MTV, they were tremendous help to our club during the pandemic, where we were able to continue the speaker program by having the speakers show up at MTV building, record their speech. We had up to they had about 4 or 5 seats, so that members could attend, and then we stayed in business. So, thank you, Chris, and your people.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
We'll have one more.